Mom went to work that day, and I was expecting her to come home, and she never came home that day. Coming home from the hospital, the hardest thing that I ever had to do was to tell them that their mom had died that night. It was
a lot of pain.
It was a lot of pain because I didn't know. I didn't know, and I still don't know how I'm gonna do it. He had a comfort level because he had people that he could relate to. Unless you've been through it, it's hard to compare.
I feel really comfortable here. My friends at school don't understand because they never lost a mom or dad.
20,000 children each year in New Jersey lose a parent. The grief, the struggle is something that most adults and most other children can't understand. But Mary Robinson, Executive Director and founder at Imagine, a center for coping with loss, is helping these young children deal with. Welcome to the program, Mary.
Thank you for having me.
What is Imagine? Tell us about your organization.
Sure. Imagine is a free year-round grief support center for children aged 3 to 18 and their parents, and also young adults 18 to 30 who have had a parent or sibling die. And we also support families who are living with a life-altering illness. So it's not counseling or therapy, it's peer support where children come together with other children their same age, and they come together as a family, so the whole family is getting support together at the same time. And the children meet in individual support groups with other children their same age, and the groups are facilitated by trained adult volunteers from the community. So they see there's all these other kids too. It's not just me that's had my mom die or my dad die. So it's a grief support center, and it's also an education and advocacy program, with our goal being to educate all the adults in children's lives about the impact of grief and loss on children.
And that's something that you understand very personally.
Yes.
How did you get involved in this organization? How did you start it?
Well, you know, I kind of say Imagine was born in my heart over 40 years ago when my father died. I was a freshman in high school. I grew up in Madison, New Jersey, and my brother was a sophomore. My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and a year and a half later he died. My mom was a stay-at-home mom and realized she was going to have to quickly figure out how to get a job and pay the bills. When my dad got sick, he had just changed jobs, so there was no medical insurance. And we were really wiped out financially. And my mom promised everybody she would pay them back, went to work in real estate. So it was almost like losing a second parent. She was pretty much gone 24/7.
Your life as you knew it changed completely.
It changed completely.
How did you deal emotionally with the loss?
Not very well.
Did you recognize that you weren't dealing with it well? Were you aware of your own process?
Only in hindsight. My brother and I acted out in ways typical of grieving children. Looking back, I can say we were textbook examples of grieving children. But nobody knew back then. You know, children were the forgotten mourners. So that's what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross called children. And so nobody knew when my grades went down, when I quit the track team and quit the school paper and started acting out in different ways, as did my brother. Nobody knew what to do or what to say or to really even make the connection. These are grieving kids. They miss their dad, and they're behaving their internal emotions. So there was no support. My mom was working full-time and was extraordinarily resilient, and she really made my life possible. But we went from a family of 4 eating dinner around the table together every night to a family dispersed, and each of us with our own pain, but nobody talking about it.
You say, and one of the focuses here with Imagine is that children at different age levels grieve differently.
Yes.
So how did you take your experience? How have you learned about the grieving process and tailored a program that's age appropriate for what these kids go through?
That's a great question. We are actually founded on a model that's been around for over 30 years. So even though I'm the founder of Imagine, I didn't dream up this model. It first started over 30 years ago out in Portland, Oregon. There was a little boy named Dougie Turno who was dying of cancer, and he was at a medical center there. And he basically said to the adults in his life, you know, what's the deal? How come nobody's talking to us? Like, we want to talk. The other kids and I, we all know we're very sick. We're probably going to die, but nobody's talking about it. So he went to his nurse, who was being mentored by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross at the time, And this little boy had the good fortune to write a letter to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and basically say, what's the deal? Adults are so weird, nobody's talking about it. And so his nurse started running support groups in her living room. And since then, and then they incorporated as the Dougie Center because they outgrew their living room, needed to start a nonprofit, and Dougie had since died, and so they named it after him.
And so that model is the model that you follow now?
Yes. So they've helped over 500 other centers around the country start. So when we started Good Grief in 2004, there was only one grief support center in New Jersey, the most densely populated state in the country, and yet there were no grief support centers.
So there are not outlets for these kids who are grieving?
Correct.
Or not enough anyway.
Yes.
So you have a couple different approaches. There's one room in particular that I'm curious about, the volcano room. Tell us about that.
So the volcano room is a great space in our center where children can go to get physical and kind of discharge their kinetic energy. There's kinetic energy in the body that's attached to emotions, so difficult emotions. And until you discharge that energy, it's very hard for kids to talk and to access what they're feeling and to kind of, they're just so full of energy. So the volcano room, they go and they pound on pillows and drums, they tear up phone books, they stomp on bubble wrap. It's a place to get physical, discharge the energy, and then they can better talk about their feelings and their emotions and what's going on with them.
Do you find that kids open up better one-on-one with their peers or in group settings with their peers?
Absolutely. So a lot of times
better than with adults.
Exactly. So a lot of times adults will say, "How are you doing?" You know, and the kids are like, "I'm fine." Especially teenagers, they don't want to talk, but with their peers, and that's the beauty of this model. It's a peer support model. So they meet with other kids their same age, where everybody gets like, we're the same inside in our hearts. We're the same, and that's the other great part about the program is kids learn like. Even though we look different, we come from different places, we may dress different, you know, we're the same in our hearts. It's universal, and they become friends for life. So the way that the program works is we have kids meet based on developmental age. So the 3 to 6 year olds meet together, then 6 to 9 years old meet together, 10 to 12, teenagers, and then the parents are meeting. So children meet with kids their same age, and the activities in those groups are age appropriate for their developmental age.
And you've seen this program work?
Powerfully. It's life-changing.
How much do you think this would have impacted you if you'd had an outlet like this?
I think it would have completely changed my life. I always say I lost years of my life to unresolved grief, just really going off track. So, you know, I worked in the corporate world for 14 years, and then I left to work full-time in the field of children's grief support when I discovered there actually was a model to help grieving children. So my commitment is really to ensure that other children don't lose years of their life to unresolved grief, because it's not necessary. You just need support. You need someone to get that you've had a loss, and that matters, and we need to pay attention, and we need to give you a way to tell your story. You know, looking back, my mom told me years later, she said, you know, I must have told my story, you know, talked about your dad's death and illness over 100 times to her friend Carla in the living room. And that's when I realized my brother and I never got to tell our story. And that's a key ingredient to healthy mourning.
Well, Mary Robinson, we're glad that you're telling your story now and you're helping other children deal with their grief and move on and live very successful lives. Mary Robinson, Executive Director and founder of Imagine, a Center for Coping with Loss. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And don't go anywhere, because we're coming back right after this.
Life and Living has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence, and NJTV. Funding for this edition of Life and Living with Joanna Gagis has been provided by Investors Bank, NJIT, PSE&G, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey Sharing Network, Cone Resnick, and by the Russell Berry Foundation. Promotional support provided by The Record, North Jersey's trusted source, and NorthJersey.com, and by Commerce Magazine.